Great news for Kratom and the Kratom community, and great news for activism and the activist community. DEA withdraws the Kratom ban, opens public comment period, as reported by U.S. News and World Report and Stephen Nelson reporting. This is Brian Strong from the Daily Dope Show. Please subscribe. I've done a lot of stories about Kratom since the Kratom ban was threatened by the DEA, and every time there's an update, you can count on me getting back to it and keeping you informed. So here it is. Caving to an energetic pressure campaign, the Drug Enforcement Administration on Wednesday said it will drop a proposed emergency ban on Kratom, a Southeast Asian tree leaf product that consumers say treats pain, addiction, and a long list of other conditions. The DEA now will open a public comment period ending December 1st, after which it will decide whether or not to move forward with a ban or some other restriction on Kratom, which generally is brewed as a tea or consumed in pills. Quote, based on the response we've gotten over the last month or so, we believe it's the prudent and responsible action to take, DEA spokesman Russ Bayer said. Quote, we want to make sure this is a transparent process. We want to have an open dialogue with the public. It's a big win for Kratom users who burned up the phone lines of the DEA and Congress, where dozens of lawmakers signed letters asking the anti-drug agency to reconsider. Quote, today we are thankful to the DEA for listening to the voices of consumers, congresspeople, and research scientists studying this plant, says Susan Ash, who corralled the backlash, including a well-attended White House protest, as leader of the American Kratom Association consumer group. Quote, we still believe no scheduling is necessary because it's been used safely here in the U.S. for decades and across the world for millennia, Ash adds. Quote, while we were very thankful that our voices are heard today, we still have a lot of work cut out for us. The DEA initially surprised and enraged consumers in August with a sudden announcement that it would make two compounds in Kratom, mitragynine and 7-hydromitragynine, substance 1 substances, effectively banning the plant with as little as 30 days' notice. More than 2,000 Kratom consumers, the vast majority opposed to the ban, proceeded to call the DEA and share their stories. So there was about 2,000 people called the DEA in the week leading up to the ban. They have claimed individually that Kratom has given them medical value, Bayer says, that it has medical utility ranging from migraine headaches to chronic pain to Crohn's disease to anxiety, depression, opioid withdrawal. These are all conditions that medicines usually try to alleviate. Through science, though scientists are only beginning to understand its effects, consumers tout Kratom as a natural painkiller without the fogginess of pharmaceuticals, as an energy-boosting mood elevator, and as a way to stay away from addictions, particularly opiates. But the DEA points to assertions that it can sometimes become addictive and claim 15 deaths in the U.S. are associated with its use. Kratom advocates say many people don't experience withdrawal after regular use, and that they believe most, if not all, of the deaths featured other drug use. Among those who campaigned to keep Kratom legal were researchers such as Andrew Krugel, an associate research scientist at Columbia University. He had to rush to complete a research project before the ban took effect, and had to boil in alcohol his stash of Kratom to convert the active compounds into non-scheduled analogs ahead of September 30th, the initial day the ban could have taken effect. Initial research shows that Kratom may offer significant harm reduction for people who abuse legal painkiller medications or illegal opiates like heroin. Krugel told U.S. News and Research suggests mitragynine and 7-hydroxymitragynine result in different effects than traditionally abused opiates, appearing only to be partial agonists of the mu opioid receptor with a ceiling effect regardless of dose, and that they also appear to be biased agonists, meaning they activate what is called the G protein pathway, but not a separate opioid pathway associated with constipation and respiratory depression, a primary cause of overdose deaths. So did you hear that? Basically, in a nutshell, without with a ceiling effect regardless of dose seems to indicate that the most intense level of effect that you can get will happen regardless of whether you take a little, a lot more. Now I know the more you take, the more you get it, but there's a ceiling, and if you continue to take it past that ceiling, it's not going to increase the intensity of that effect. The ceiling's not going to, you're not going to feel more intensely affected by it if you reach that and then you take more kratom. Also, what was said was that there was uh, the G protein pathway is what is activated, and the G protein pathway is separate from another opioid pathway that, if activated and overstimulated or whatever, causes constipation and respiratory depression, which is the primary cause of overdose deaths. So there's two ways that it's saying that it's safer than actual opiates right there, just plain flat out. In animal studies, both mitragynine and hydroxymitragynine, or 7-hydroxymitragynine products, or produce almost no respiratory depression, Krugel said. Of course, this hasn't been rigorously studied in humans because there have been no clinical trials, but anecdotal evidence, which is quite substantial, suggests that people aren't dying of respiratory depression. Overdoses involving legal and illegal opiates, including heroin, combined killed more than 28,000 Americans in 2014 alone, and many recovering addicts said they were worried of what would happen to them if kratom became illegal. Now remember the DEA's number back here, talking about 15 people have died from kratom, and I've read some of the info on a few of these deaths, and I have seen no evidence that the kratom was the cause of death, and none of them listed the cause of death as respiratory depression. So to me, you got 28,000 deaths over here, and that's Schedule 2. There's a lot of those that are on Schedule 2 and Schedule 3 opiates. 28,000 Americans dying in 1 year from opiates. 15 deaths, period, that they claim was attributed to kratom. Not even true if you look into each case by case scenario. Unbelievable. Suicide was even the cause of a couple of these deaths. I mean, this is the same with marijuana. Like suicide, marijuana does not cause suicide. Kratom does not cause suicide. So this crazy idea that you take a drug and it's going to make you commit suicide is just absurd. All right. Furthermore, Krugel said that mitragynine and mitragynine 7-hydroxymitragynine 7 preliminarily appears similar in terms of pharmacology to a drug called aliceridine that is undergoing FDA administration approval phase 3 trials in humans, something that fuels kratom advocate claims that corporations simply want to ban a natural rival. And it looks like that's exactly what they're doing. I mean, it's hard to say they're not doing that. Like the DEA's, or the FDA's just sick them to the DEA, and they go out and shut down everybody that's trying to do this natural herb thing. Bear says the DEA is awaiting completion of an 8-factor analysis on kratom that it first required of the FDA in 2014 to underpin a permanent scheduling decision. The DEA's initial emergency scheduling action would have lasted 2 or at most 3 years. Bear says there are 4 options on how kratom regulation will move forward after December 1st. Option 1, if the FDA has not completed its analysis, the DEA can issue another notice that it will go ahead with the emergency placement in Schedule 1, making kratom illegal with as little as 30 days public notice. Option 2, the FDA has not completed its analysis. The DEA can wait until it does before taking action. Option 3, the FDA determines kratom has an accepted medical use leading to permanent placement in Schedule 2, a category of tightly controlled drugs that includes cocaine or lower, or perhaps no scheduling at all. Option 4, the FDA determines kratom has no accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse, resulting in a public notice and comment period for proposed permanent listing in Schedule 1. Though it's unclear what ultimately will happen, the ball appears to have been kicked to at least the new year, and the drug policy reform advocates say it's an unprecedented victory. The ball's kind of been kicked back to our court, so you got to get on getting a hold of the DEA, quite frankly. So, quote, this is a truly remarkable moment to see the Drug Enforcement Administration, a law enforcement agency with a long track record of ignoring both science and public opinion, being forced to consider the scientific evidence and public opinion before taking additional steps with respect to Kratom. That was Grant Smith, Deputy Director of the National Affairs at the Drug Policy Alliance. But as Ash, the consumer group leader, says, advocates will indeed have battles ahead. This withdrawal of our notice of intent to temporarily schedule Kratom should not be misconstrued, Bayer says. DEA still firmly believes that Kratom is dangerous and is harmful. So there's, that's kind of ominous to hear him say that at the last minute. Like, they're just scrambling around in the background trying to save face. This direct action has definitely at least stalled them, and maybe they're thinking of a better way out of this that don't cause a lot of public outrage. But I gotta continue to keep saying that this is unbelievably small amount of people doing a direct action. I know 2,000's a lot, but overall, if you compare it to the marijuana movement, you could probably find 2,000 people in your local town that would make a phone call to the DEA for marijuana these days. So 2,000 people, direct action, the DEA pumped the brakes a little bit, but it looks like they're gonna move on something. They punted it until next year, and they kicked the ball back into the hands of the Kratom community. Now, what I have right here is the actual letter from the DEA talking about how they withdrew their notice of intent to temporarily place the two substances in Kratom on Schedule 1. I'm going to do another clip about that. I'm going to read that, and in this there is information about if you want to tell them what you think, you can contact them. So that's important to know, and I'll get right on that. And thanks again for watching these updates and more. I will stay on these stories as long as people keep watching them. Share, subscribe, and like.